On average now, according to Zutshi, there's 21 tenants looking at one property. The government is saying, you know what, tenants are paying too much money. The landlord service has been pretty poor. You landlords have to up your game. This is a business. First possession claim, I started acting for landlords in 1991, believe it or not. I did my first court case before a judge at 16. 2003. I did my first property show, I think, in 2001. My first TV programme in 2001 as well.
And I think you probably are closer to the pulse of what's going on in terms of regulation than probably anyone else.
I mean, what business gets taxed on turnover rather than profit? Well, the landlord business does.
Yeah.
It's half full rather than half empty. There's more tenants, better tenants than ever before.
Yeah.
They're paying more rent than ever before. There's less void periods than ever before. And the demand is through the roof.
Yeah.
My biggest beef is with the court system because I see it at Landlord Action. Last year we did over 4,000 instructions. We've got 23 staff. We can't get through to the court. The headlines, I think, which are scaring landlords are periodic tenancies, the grounds, the courts, Section 21, you have to have a full... Renters' Rights Bill is about levelling up, and I get all that, and I understand all that. I'm all about practicality, because I've lived and breathed this. The bear biting back is the landlord selling a property. Who loses out? The tenant.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Property Magic Podcast. And this is a very special episode with a special guest. In fact, one of the only guests who I've had on the podcast who's not actually done my Property Mastermind program. So welcome to Paul Shamplina. Hello, Paul.
How are you?
I'm really good, thank you.
I'm in Birmingham.
You are in Birmingham, so we took the opportunity to get you in front of a camera because, Paul, you are a real expert when it comes to landlord issues, the founder of Landlord Action, commercial officer for Hamilton Fraser, and you're pretty well known for the Channel 5 program, Nightmare Tenants and Slum Landlords.
Correct.
And you've had quite a lot of interesting experiences over that, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But the main thing I want to talk, which we'll get to in a moment after we know a bit more about you, is the Renters' Rights Bill, right? Because that is probably the biggest thing that's hit the private rental sector for the last 30 years. So we're going to talk a lot about that in the time we have available. But first of all, Paul, just give us a quick background. How did you get into this world?
Well, from my mum and dad.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's all I want to know.
Right, okay, so we'll move on.
Yeah.
Right, move on. So I ended my first job at 16. I worked in a law firm. Left school with no qualifications. We used to have O-levels back in those days.
Yeah, I did O-levels. Yeah.
Got 0. Anyway, worked as an outdoor clerk, worked in the recession 88, 90, moved back up to London, issued my first possession claim and started acting for landlords in 1991, believe it or not. I did my first court case before a judge at 16.
Wow.
Right, so I had loads of, and that's where I think I got my experience for obviously public speaking. And then I worked in law firms and then left the law firms, became a private investigator, debt collector, and did evictions, did a whole load of different stuff, some mad stories.
And that's how the TV program came about.
And then what happened was I did eviction for my old business partner, and I evicted 23 illegal tenants in a 3-bed house in Edgware. And out of that, we started Landlord Action in 2000 because we were fed up with lawyers charging too much money.
Yeah.
So we were the original company that did fixed fees and a 3-step process because we basically were disruptors. And then that was 25 years ago, so our 25th anniversary.
Yeah, we've known each other about 22 years, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
as long as I've been running PIN, I think.
I know. So I remember when you did your first show. I mean, we are veterans.
2003.
2003. I did my first property show, I think, in 2001. My first TV programme in 2001 as well. So yeah, I mean, like you, we've been on the circuit for years, and
we've seen a lot of people come and go over that time.
We've seen a lot of people come, a lot of shysters come and go.
Unfortunately,
a lot of come. I remember I did I won't mention a name. I remember I had the audacity to do a talk at the Berkshire property meet once called Beware of the Property Sharks.
Yeah.
And there was a few property sharks in the audience. Look, being a bailiff and what I came from, I was used to like confrontation and stuff like that. Yeah. But obviously setting up Landlord Action, and then inadvertently I set a brand up. I set my own brand up. I didn't mean to go into this. It was about, I had a chance to go on a TV program, but how I understood PR really well, and I think you most probably understand this as well from running your business and being successful. Me and my old business partner, it was just me and him, we sent out 4,000 brochures about fixed fee and help eviction. Yeah. And one of the journalists at the Evening Standard picked it up, and she wrote an article in the Evening Standard saying blessing for landlords. She said it's the best product she's ever seen.
Wow.
And out of that, we worked out we had about 12,000 calls. It came so early, and that was 3 months after I started the business in 2000. Wow. So I understood PR really quickly and embraced it. And then in 2014, we became a regulated firm of solicitors because I didn't know how the industry had gone. Then in 2016, 2017, I sold the business to my mate, Eddie Hooker at Hamilton Fraser. and I wanted to be part of something bigger. At that time, I was doing the TV programme, doing a radio show on LBC called The Property Hour with Clive Ball. So I was doing that. I was at the peak of the PR stuff, and even though it's kicked on from since then. And then with Hamilton Fraser, we own My Deposits. We own the Property Redress scheme. We
all
own
things that landlords should be
client
using.
Money Protect. They're government-backed schemes.
Yeah.
We own Total Landlord Insurance. We do the landlord insurance for the NRLA.
Yeah.
We own Landlord Zone, which I still run today. And then Landlord Action being part of that. We even set up a letting agent advice line in COVID. So I'm on the board of that company. So I had to become adaptable and become part of the corporate world, which was really alien to me.
Yeah.
And we've got now in Hamilton Fraser, we got bought out a couple of years ago by the 5th biggest insurance brokers in the world called Brown & Brown. We have about 240 staff. And we act and touch about 500,000 landlords and about 23,000 letting agents. So we're right in the heart of the private rental sector.
Yeah. And I think you probably are closer to the pulse of what's going on in terms of regulation than probably anyone else.
Well,
so I'm really honoured to have you here sharing and talking about this.
No, we are. And I think because when there's ever... I mean, look, obviously we have different political parties. Civil servants stay where they are. And we're going to talk about the Renters' Rights Bill, which is levelling up now. The government are saying, you know what, tenants are paying too much money. The landlord service has been pretty poor. You landlords have to up your game. This is a business.
Yeah.
The hobby landlord game is
Which I agree with, actually, by the way.
I totally agree.
I think it should be run as a business.
It should be. And the mindset has to change, though.
Mindset's huge when it comes to property, And obviously you're a property investor yourself as well, which is really important. I get frustrated where you have experts who aren't actually in property themselves.
Yeah.
But you get it. And I think you are a champion of landlords. So let's talk about this Renters' Right Bill briefly. I mean, there's so much to cover. Let's just do headlines. And I feel because of the campaigning by people like you and NRLA, it's probably not as bad as many people thought it was going to be. I mean, still, it's not like it was 20 years ago.
No.
And anyone who's starting now, well, this is the reality. We just need to adapt to get used to it.
Yeah.
But I think it is scaring and putting off a lot of landlords.
But it is. Look, watch the detail. Keep calm. Watch the detail. Watch videos like this or my YouTube channel or the NRLA or whatever.
Yeah.
Look, the landlord is a business, it's long term. We have a housing shortage. We have a social housing shortage. But you know what? I said this at the talk we just had at the Landlord Investment Show. It's half full rather than half empty. There's more tenants, better tenants than ever before. They're paying more rent than ever before. There's less void periods than ever before. And the demand is through the roof.
Yeah.
But there's this anti-landlord feeling. And the tenant organisations don't help that. It's a them and us. The tenants are the customers at the end of the day. Yeah, Without tenants, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be. We want, the name of the game is, I want that tenant to be in my property as long as possible. And you know what? I might not put it as high as market rent. It might be lower because you know what? The turnaround times and refurbing cost and the pre-let time to find a tenant, it's all time. It's all a ball
if you speak to most experienced landlords who've had tenants for a long time, they haven't pushed the rents up as much as they could because, as you quite say, having a good tenant in situ is much better than having to change and have the void periods and having to refurb the property. So actually that works quite well, doesn't it?
It does work well, but the game changed. 2017 it changed with George Osborne when he killed it. That started. I mean, what business gets taxed on turnover rather than profit? Well, the landlord business does.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this earlier today because, you know, I feel very strongly about this. Yes. We are being discriminated against. It's the only business in the UK where you cannot offset some genuine expenses
it's
to
mental.
reduce the tax.
It's mental.
And there are landlords out there right now who, because of interest rates have gone up,
Yeah.
their mortgage payment's gone up, and the mortgage payment is more than the rent. So it's costing the money, but at the end of the year, the taxman says, I want my profit, please. But it's outrageous.
It's mental because we had that. Then I was just going to come to it. 2022, you had, the bodged budget where obviously, you've got 2 million fixed term mortgages coming to an end in 2025. So landlords are looking to be having to forcibly sell. Then you've got electrical performance, the EPCs upgrade, and all that noise going on, and how much is that going to cost me? Then of course you've got regulation changes, which on average, we did a survey at Total Landlord, our headline brand. To 3,500 landlords. 60% of landlords are really worried about regulation change. But landlords are adaptable and flexible and they can get around it. And a lot of the stuff is okay, but landlords need confidence to stay in the market.
Yeah.
And, and I say to landlords, if you don't need to sell, don't sell. But the problem is landlords try and do everything. And you don't put a price on the time. Quite rightly, with your portfolio, trying to find the right managing agent is a feat in itself because there's a lot of crap agents out there, but some really, really good agents out there.
And I touch wood, I have really good agents.
You want an agent that cares. And I do a lot of training with letting agents, not just getting asked to do landlord events so they can get more landlords at their events and that, but having an agent that cares, and that's another podcast for another day. But if we come back to the Renters' Rights Bill, the headline is abolishment Section 21, no fault.
Yeah.
The 2-month notice.
Yes.
So I've been campaigning. I went to my MP. I even did a post today on LinkedIn. You get rid of Section 21. You need to make sure the courts work. You've got periodic tenancies, 1-month tenancies, so fixed terms are coming to an end.
Yeah.
We think the legislation might come in at the end of the year, if not maybe April next year. Labour are trying to push it through. At the moment, it's House of Lords stage. House of Lords is mixed. House of Parliament is all Labour, give or take majority. So a lot of the amendments will fall by the wayside. So, and then you've got to have the grounds for Section 8 to be strengthened. So if you want to sell your property in the new world, you've got to wait 8 months and then serve a 4-month notice under Section 8 under Ground 1A, or if you want to move back into property. What's also going to happen is the rent arrears, a mandatory ground, which is the most common ground for rent arrears, it's 2 months and 14 days. It's going to go to 3 months and 28 days. Then, of course, if a tenant doesn't pay and there's going to be affordability issues, then you have to apply to the court. My biggest beef is with the court system because I see it at Landlord Action. Last year we did over 4,000 instructions. I've got 23 staff. We can't get through to the court. You can't go and see anyone at the court. We're waiting 15 months for an eviction date at Clerkenwell County Court. And if a landlord's not getting the rent, it's crippling.
Yeah.
So, you have to look at rent guarantee insurance or use a company like rentguarantor.com, who are a really good company, where you can ask a tenant to take a guarantor's policy out.
Yeah. But
the headlines, I think, which are scaring landlords, are periodic tenancies, the grounds, the courts, Section 21, you have to have a fault. At the moment, my worry was, when they announced all this, was going to be landlord panic, and I've called it. And I called this 5-6 years ago. I went to my MP. I said about the rental stock crisis. She mentioned it. This is Teresa Villiers, and it's on my YouTube channel. The interview. She mentioned it in the King's Speech, Simon, that she gave the data from Landlord Action. She said that if you don't get it right, more and more landlords are going to serve Section 21. We've never served so many more Section 21s in the last year to 18 months because landlords are selling.
It's interesting that we are seeing that, because we were talking earlier that this is causing a problem. Higher interest rates, properties not making a profit is causing a problem. And also, a lot of landlords who maybe at some point were thinking about handing their properties to their kids. And I speak to a lot of landlords who are selling it because the kids don't want the properties. And they could get someone to manage them, but we're seeing so many people selling.
Well, they need to, but there's and like I said, I do like 1 hour Zooms and I advise on stuff like that because it's really, really important. There's some great agents out there. So you need to qualify your agent because they are the most important thing as you're part of your power team with your finance and your tax guy and your evictions better and all that type and your conveyance and all that type of stuff. I think that's really, really important. If we look at the other stuff in the renters' rights, you shouldn't be... Look, Awab's Law, a poor 6-year-old kid that died in Rochdale Housing Association through mould in 2022, disgraceful. A social property, we talked about this in the debate.
Yeah.
The social housing sector is far worse than the private rental sector. I don't care what anyone says, right? You've got anti-bidding laws, so stopping tenants bidding, so there's an auction. Well, that's fair enough. The biggest challenge now, and look, it's really, really tough being a tenant in 2025. My sister, I've been a guarantor for her and that, and she says that when she gets a text from her landlord, she gets anxiety. Tenants are getting anxiety hearing from their landlords, thinking they're going to be evicted. I'm even going to be interviewing people on my YouTube channel, tenants that have been evicted, because I want to show everyone all sides of what's going on. So I really feel for tenants at the moment when they're paying 35-40% and rents are rising. Rent caps aren't coming in. Section 13, which is rent increases, there's going to be a whole new procedure about that. I think also anti-discrimination. You can't say no DSS or no children. We shouldn't be doing that in 2025. You're going to have a property data whereby landlords will have to be registered on a data. Where are all these landlords? There's 2.7 million landlords. Where are they? The government want to know. They have it. You have a register in Scotland. You have a register in Wales with Rent Smart Wales. You're going to have landlord redress. So we do redress for letting agents. So if I'm your tenant and you're not carrying out repairs, or you're, harassing me or whatever, where does a tenant go? There's nowhere for them to go. So that's all really reasonable and quite rightly, tenants should have more rights. So the whole point, there's other bits and pieces coming in. You shouldn't, we're talking about a property portal. You think about, we could talk, we just, had a conversation, a debate where Birmingham Council were on our panel. You think about licensing, how how shambolic licensing is.
Yeah.
In 2025,
I think
every council is different.
And a lot of councils use licensing as a way to raise money.
Well, they raise money because a lot of them skin. But you can give landlords all the rules and regulation in the world, and 95% of landlords are good. There's far more bad tenants than bad landlords.
Yeah, and I guess you've seen that firsthand.
I see it in my TV program, Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. Those slum landlords are criminal landlords. That are, no one,
and they're not going to adhere to regulations anyway, are they?
They're not going to adhere to the regulations. They're not going to turn up at the landlord investment show, the property investment show, or join the NRLA, or the problem is it's about enforcement. You can bring all the rules and regulation in. So I've shadowed environmental health officers, and they have a thankless task. A lot of it is down to naivety, where landlords need to be educated. I actually think, and I know, I'm maybe preaching to converted because you run an education company. I do education as well. I think landlord education should be mandatory in some sort, even if it's just an online course. I think with Rent Smart Wells, if anything is good at Rent Smart Wells is managing a property is really difficult, and that's an art in itself. And I think there needs to be more.
Even if someone doing it, it's still your responsibility to make sure it's done correctly. Yeah.
You're on the hook. Look, there's going to be more fines, more than ever on landlords. Rent repayment orders, at the moment it's 1 year, it's going to be 2 years. Yeah. So if you rent a property out and it's not licensed, I can go to a solicitor, an ambulance chasing solicitor, and they charge a percentage, no win, no fee. Or, obviously if you haven't been compliant, you're not in the new world, right, you need to comply with all the stuff that's coming in. If you don't, and your tenant is clued up, and they go to a solicitor's, it's going to happen. It's happened in the social sector. It's going to happen in the private rental sector. They can make a claim to try and get 2 years back of rent. Can you imagine what a killer that is for landlords? Absolutely. As well as all your risers of your mortgage costs and taxation.
And on that note, we are going to be running an event in Birmingham on the 28th of September.
Yes.
All about this, saying exactly what you need to do.
How to survive.
How to survive, because it's important. And unfortunately, there are going to be some landlords who fall foul because they don't educate themselves.
Yeah.
And I actually feel for the tenants as well. I think when the governments try and regulate and interfere in a free market, I think they've got to raise standards, that's good. But then, as you say, I actually think some tenants are losing out. And actually, I think there were some slightly more vulnerable tenants who are maybe not very good with their money. No. They're going to find it very difficult to find people who are going to take them on. Landlords are going to be careful about who they put in their properties.
There is. So referencing is going to get more stringent.
Yeah.
I worry about the more vulnerable tenants on benefits because of market rents. If you've got a single mother with 3 kids and she's on universal credit, as a landlord, am I going to get that universal credit direct to me? Is that money enough to market rent? Do I go to a professional couple that will pay me £300-400 a month more, and I know I'm going to get my professional rent? It's law of economics, so I worry about that. That could be an issue. I think the unintended consequence with all this, and you've got look, longer term, tenants are going to have more rights. Renters' Rights Bill is about levelling up, and I get all that, and I understand all that. I'm all about practicality because I've lived and breathed this. Yeah. And that's why myself and NRLA and other stakeholders in the industry, we tell civil servants about stuff that's happening and stuff like that, because you need to keep landlords in. Landlords should actually have an incentive to stay in. If I have my tenant in for a certain amount of time, I should get some sort of tax initiative or some sort of tax incentive to keep me in the industry. Don't bash landlords, because I say this, and I said this in so many podcasts, if you keep prodding the bear, Simon, eventually it bites back. The bear biting back is a landlord selling a property. Who loses out? The tenant. So the tenant's been in the property for 6-7 years. They've had a good relationship. The landlord said, I can't do this anymore. For all these anti-landlord feeling, taxation, whatever, all that, and eventually it's just not working for me. And that's what we're seeing at Landlord Action. So they sell the property. I think a lot of landlords will sell properties with tenants in situ. That will rise. But I think the reality is, if you're a tenant living in a property and you've had a great relationship with your landlords, which there is an argument to say that tenants prefer dealing with agents rather than landlords. They stay in properties longer. I think there is a stat to that. But if they leave the property and the rent was £400 a month cheaper, and then they've got to go in the open market to find what's available, on average now, according to Zoopla, there's 21 tenants looking at one property. So they're fighting over property.
It's crazy.
So then they have to pay more. Then there's removal costs. So there's all these unintended consequences. And then, of course, the tenant loses out when the landlord sells out. And and I call this, and it is a bit frustrating, but there are landlords coming into the market.
Of course.
But it's that mindset.
I think there are less landlords coming in than there are exiting.
Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons rents have gone up because
Of
there's just
course,
not enough
the
supply.
shortage.
So actually, if you're coming in or if you're staying in, it's actually quite good. As long as you can adapt to make sure you're doing things correctly, there's a strong demand in the UK. And the population is growing. That's only going to get worse.
We've got 68 million people living here. So,
but it's okay because apparently the government are building 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years.
We talked about that.
So that'll all.
And
let's move on, shall we?
I'm going to win the lottery on Saturday. I mean, look, you need, like I said, you need 25,000 bricklayers to do that. That's not going to happen. So I think the reality is that, you know, we need to keep good landlords in the sector. And stop bashing the landlord. Look, it doesn't help me. I'm on a program called Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. I apologise, but I think, you know, it is a profession, and that's why we've agreed to do this course together, because it's, you know, you can find the best deal, you can do your option, you can do your below market value deal, but sustaining a good tenancy and making
great tenants in there,
you've got to make sure, and building, it's a people business.
It is.
There's an art to it, and hopefully people will get that on the 28th of September.
Fantastic. Paul, look, we could talk all day, and I'm sure we would, but look, what we're going to do is, so below this video, we're going to put a link to the event in September. And that's going to be in Birmingham, very easy to get to. Also, I'd love to do a further, longer chat about this. So let's put a link down there to do a webinar.
And my new YouTube channel.
Your new channel, which is Paul Shamplina Talk In Property with no G.
Yeah.
So Talk In Property.
Talk In Property. Bit cockney and all that. Yeah. So I launched that. I should have done it in COVID, and eventually I'm doing it once a month now. I just do it in my direct approach of how I do. I've got like.
You're not shy in coming forward, are you?
I'm not shy in coming forward, and I'll just tell it how it is. And I think so I've just launched that. So that's just a free education.
Great. So we'll put a link maybe below that. Check that as well. So Paul, thank you so much for coming. And
pleasure.
If you've been watching the YouTube channel, click the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to get notified anytime we bring out a new video. And if you're listening to the podcast, it would be great if you can go and find wherever you've downloaded the podcast and give us a 5-star review saying what you like about the podcast so more people find it. We'd really appreciate that. Until next time, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill.